The Morristown Green, a central park echoing with the footfalls of Washington and his compatriots during the Revolutionary War, is not merely a serene escape, but a living testament to the town's pivotal role in shaping our nation. Morristown's history seamlessly intertwines with every individual who grew up there, creating a childhood rich in the echoes of the past and a vibrant spirit of community carried forward by each successive generation. These are their stories. This is Beyond the Green.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Green, where we talk about the people and places of Morristown. My name is Peter, Morristown class of 1990, and this green hyena in front of me is...
And I'm Satiri, or Terry, I got something in my throat, Morristown High School class of 1987.
Yeah, I think you got a little Simba in there, little hyena boy. But listen, I got to tell you, this last episode that we did with Christy and Virilis was
huge.
In the words of Jill Abramovich, it was exquisite. It was delicious.
Yeah.
Okay. I have to tell, I really want to thank, first I want to thank Christy for taking the time out for doing that. But also I want to thank our viewers and our listeners, whether you're listening on the podcast, wherever you get your podcast from, or you watch on YouTube. We really appreciate the support you give us, and please continue to do so. We love your comments, and please follow us. We're also on Instagram. We also have a Facebook page, so continue to follow us for all the updates. But I just want to touch base on something really quick with regards to comments. Listen, folks, we love when you comment. We love it. You want to be positive, fine. You want to criticize, fine. But here's the thing. If you're going to criticize one of our guests, have the, lack of a better word, the testicular fortitude to not create a false account so nobody knows who you are. Like, if you're going to say it, say it. Like, have the balls to put it out there, attach your name to it. I don't listen. At the end of the day, it's social media. You know what? People say stupid things all the time, but if you want the 5 minutes to complain about something, let us know. We'll put you on. Put a face to the comments. Again, we don't care, but I just think it's a bit hypocritical that if you're going to say something, put your money where your mouth is and put your face to it. That's all I'm saying. I said, this is the ongoing problem with social media. The keyboard warriors out there, the trolls to be, we live in a society now that everybody has an opinion, and everybody's entitled to their opinion. That's what's great about this country. Whether or not you like it or not, you don't have to say anything. You can just stop watching or move a little forward or watch something else, Or, like I said, contact us and we'll put you on. Hell, we'll give you, 30 minutes of your time, because we'll have maybe the Charbon Bear sponsor us for that, because I'm sure it's going to stink. But anyways, so yeah, folks. So once again, we appreciate your viewership. We appreciate you watching, listening. And again, if you have any ideas for any future episodes, people that you'd like to see on, of course, if you've been watching in the past, we have our own list on who we want to get on. But we would love ideas, any recommendations. And that's how our next guest came to be. So on this episode of Beyond the Green, we have one of my fellow classmates, Morristown High School class of 1990, Eric Phillips. In one of the episodes, I believe was the Luke Darnell episode, his brother Fred reached out and said, hey, why don't you reach out to Eric? I think he'd be great. And this is perhaps, and I'm a little biased because we were classmates, but I'm a little bit biased to all the guests that went to Morristown High School because we're alumnus, so but this one was a little. This one I felt a little more special because growing up, I walked the halls with Eric at Sussex Avenue School, at Frelinghuysen, and also at the high school itself. And this is a really, really great episode. One of the questions that we asked when we do our 5 simple things segment, I asked Eric, what would 2024 Eric tell 1990 Eric if he could slip a note into his pocket the night before graduation? And I think the advice that he gave holds so true for the graduates of 2024 that are going to be graduating in a few weeks. It really is really, really on point. Really on point. It was some great, great advice that he gave out there. Also, in the upcoming weeks, folks, I just want to let you know that we are going to be starting another collaboration with another group involved with the Alumni Association. More on that in a few weeks. We will be releasing a press release. So we're going to kind of combine our resources together to put out the best possible product on each end. So stay tuned for that. So, folks, listen, without further ado, Eric is on his way. And don't forget, like us, follow us, and feel free to comment. Eric Phillips, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. Glad to be here.
So, as many of you may not know, Eric and I were fellow graduates from Morristown High School in 1990. And off air, we were just saying it was a 30-something years since we actually put eyes on each other. But, us, the OG here, we age very, very well.
Very gracefully.
Yeah, exactly. So, Eric, let's just talk about Morristown and growing up in Morristown. Were you born in Morristown?
I was born and raised in Morristown my entire life from K through 12.
Yeah.
Went to Alfred Vail Middle School and then to Sussex Avenue School.
Oh, yeah.
And then to Frelinghuysen Junior High, not Frelinghuysen Middle School, Frelinghuysen Junior High School, and then to Morristown High. And graduated, as you just mentioned, with you, Peter, in 1990. So, yeah, grew up my entire life in Morristown, lived in the same house for all of my growing up years, the same house that my mom still lives in right now in Morristown. So it is most definitely home and always has been, always will be.
So was that more the township than it was Morristown?
No, it's in Morristown. It's on Martin Luther King Avenue right there in Morristown.
Oh, excellent. So you know Virilli's Bakery.
Oh, yeah. Virilli's is right down the street from our house growing up. We were right down the street from Virilli's and, well, I guess you could say right up the street from Virilli's and right down the street from Hanover Avenue and Minnan Arena back then when there was ice skating happening and all that, which a lot of that has changed up that area now. But yeah, that's where we were.
That's great. So growing up, so let me get into let's get a little bit into, as you were growing up, you went to Sussex Avenue, like you said, you went into Frelinghuysen, and when you were at junior high, we had other conversations. They were, they'd break it down to 7-1, 7-2, and 7-3, and then 8-1. Where were you in those sections?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I was in 7-3, and then I was in 8-3.
Okay.
And I remember the teachers because what they had was in each group or each chunk, 7-1, 7-2, 7-3, there are like 4 core teachers that made up those chunks. And so I can almost envision who those teachers were. Like Miss Rossoff was math, Mrs. Stryker was English, Miss Wright was social studies. And then Mr. Seifert was the science teacher. That was in 7th grade. And then in 8th grade, it was Mrs. Kwong was the science teacher. And who was my math? Oh, Mr. Rutkowski, I believe his name was the math teacher. And Mrs. Arlo was the English teacher, and who was social? No, not Mrs. Arlo was social studies,
Uh-huh.
and Mrs. What's her name? She was the English teacher. Oh, I was going so well. I can picture her face, can't think of her name right now.
Well, we can circle
But
back, and I'm sure
yeah,
tomorrow afternoon at 5 p.m. you'll be driving somewhere and be like, oh, this is
right.
what it was.
Yep, exactly.
So,
Exactly.
so
Castellano, Mrs.
there
Castellano.
you go. See.
Yep.
So, did you do any type of theatrical stuff while at Frelinghuysen?
At Frelinghuysen, yeah, that was where I got my first, experience in terms of doing musicals. Back
Okay.
then each year a musical would be done. And so in my seventh grade year, we did Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
Mm-hmm.
And I was one of the brothers. Joseph had all these brothers, and I was
Right.
one of them. And I think my actual brother name was Gad, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
I could be wrong on that, but I was one of the brothers and was kind of singing in the cast and dancing and really
Yeah.
enjoyed that. And then in eighth grade, we did The Wiz,
Mm-hmm.
and I was the Cowardly Lion.
Look at
And
Wow.
yeah, myself and Ed Yamoza, who
Uh-huh.
was also in our graduating class,
Sure.
shared the role of the Cowardly Lion, and so that was a lot of fun. And then from there, went on to high school and did some other, at least a couple of other musicals there as well. So yeah, had a lot of fun, and it started at Frelinghuysen. When you were in elementary school, at least back then, we actually did some plays then. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if they do that anymore, but
I
but
don't
the
know.
teachers would put on plays, and so I remember um, doing one play. I think it was back then called The Elf of Discontent. And they were just little kiddie plays, but I think that's where I got my first appreciation for being on stage.
Yeah. The funny,
You
how the funny thing about that is, I remember doing something at Alfred Vail. I couldn't tell you what it was, but we definitely did something. And it was just like, it wasn't like a full blown play, but it was enough to keep us occupied without us running around the
Yes,
stage, chasing our own tails.
yes.
So then we go to high school. And then in high school, you did forensics in high school,
I
and
did.
then you were part of the TV station as well,
Hmm.
right? As you were saying, you did the musical aspect of it. So let's talk about forensics. Like at that point in high school, did you do forensics all 4 years?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I joined forensics my sophomore year, I want to
Okay.
say. I don't
Okay.
think I did it my freshman year. Um, and the advisor and teacher for forensics at that time was Miss Joan Roden. She was in
Mm-hmm.
the English department.
Right.
And I had never heard of forensics. I didn't know what forensics was.
Mm-hmm.
It was my good friend and brother, Jermaine McElwee,
Mm-hmm.
who told me about forensics. And he had joined. And he was like, "Hey, man, you should join forensics. You'd have a ball. You'd really enjoy it." And I was like, "What
Yeah.
is forensics?"
Yeah.
It sounded scientific to me. What is that?
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, well, I mean, he knew me pretty well. He knew what I would probably like. And so I went to an
Mm-hmm.
interest meeting, and I was like, yeah, I'll do this, and started competing and really did well and just really enjoyed it. I did it for the rest of my years in high school and thought that it was a good way to, just prepare for what I was hoping was going to be my eventual career
Right.
in television. And
Yeah.
so I thought that it would help me with the communication
Mm-hmm.
and speaking extemporaneously and performance.
Yeah.
It's all kind of performance based. So yeah, I did it all 4 years. It was kind of I guess tragic in a way because we lost Miss Roden after the first year.
Yeah.
We got some new coaches, but she was no longer, she passed away.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of a blow for the team, for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
But we kept the team going, and I continued competing for the next couple of years. That
Yeah.
was a big part of my time in high school.
Yeah. Do you think that actually kind of made you at least feel much more comfortable public speaking wise, and kind of molded you or started getting you down the avenue and where you are now?
I think so. Because I recognize that not only was it important for me to be able to write, in a way that was expressive and grammatically correct and communicative, but also being able to express myself verbally. And, I always liked to talk. Talking was not an issue, but the issue was how I was talking and was I doing so in a way that was going to be presentable? And, and I knew again for TV and particular TV news, I knew that I was going to have the type of communication skills, and I thought it was going to be very competitive. And so I thought that anything I could do to give me a leg up on the communication side would be helpful. And to the short answer to your question is yes, forensics was definitely helpful. I'm glad that I did it. Not only did it help to hone those skills, but it was just downright fun, going to the meets and competing and meeting kids from all, different areas. And for somebody like me, I was not the most athletic person in high school or in grade school or in elementary school. So it was sort of my lane of competition, and it allowed me to have my family room full of trophies, which actually I think they're probably up in the attic at this point. And my mom keeps telling me I need to clean those out. But I had a family room full of trophies from local and state competitions, and it was definitely good for me in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. And, I'm going to tell you, forensics is one of the things I wish, like you, I knew more about, because in our senior year, I did academic decathlon. And I remember in one of the competitions, one of the things they do is they kind of throw you into a room, give you a topic that you have no idea about. You have 5 minutes to prepare, then you have to go give a 5-minute speech on it. And I realized at that moment, I can how quickly I can put something together. And you don't really realize it until you're kind of like, I can freaking do this. Now, did I kill it? I'm not going to tell you that I killed it, but I did it like not too bad. Like I said, okay, and then kind of like that brought you out of your shell to now, I have no problem. Either one of us, we can stand in front of a room, a few hundred people, and do a presentation. And, it's just something that as you get older, you feel a little more comfortable about. But then you also did the TV station. So it kind of brings in that other side of where you are now.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that and your experience with the station?
Yeah, I was, I feel like I was blessed in the sense that I knew from probably the time I was a junior in high school what I wanted to do in terms of a career. What I thought I would want to do for a career. And so I really sort of molded my activities based on that, and also based on what naturally came to me. I mean, this is not what I do, and what I did back in high school wasn't really a stretch for me. It was just based on, what am I naturally gifted and talented at? And so, by the time I was a junior in high school, I kind of felt like, I think I'm going to go into TV news. To which, sidebar, my parents were like, "You're gonna do what? Like, you want to be what?" I mean, because when we were in high school, junior high and high school, and this is showing our age here, computers were just blowing up. Computers was where it was. It was, computers were becoming, they were becoming at that time. And so if you went into anything computer related, you were guaranteeing some stable income for decades to come.
Right.
I just wasn't interested in computers. And when I told my parents what I was interested in, they were like, "You want to do what?" And I think it was more scary for them than it was for me, because we didn't know anybody who had ever gone into TV or gone into broadcast news. And so I don't think they were just like, they didn't use these words, but I think they wished that I had picked something more conventional.
Yeah.
And it took, several years of me being in this field before they actually even realized what I was doing. But that's another story. I guess we'll get into that. But the bottom line is, being in the TV station at MHS, Morristown High School, we did a show called The Colonial Corner.
Yeah.
And I don't remember how often it aired. I think it maybe was once a week or once every other week. And if I remember correctly, myself and Lara, whose name I don't remember right now, served as the co-anchors, and sometimes Susan Van Hugelen also
Are you talking
would serve.
about Lara Allen?
Lara Allen, yes,
Okay.
yes, would serve as co-anchors on the
Mm-hmm.
show, sometimes reporters, and
Yeah.
just report on different things around the school that were of interest to students. And it would
Right.
actually the show, which I'm sure there are some never before seen, or at least things that I wish were never before seen, tapes around the house, at my mom's house even now, of past episodes of Colonial Corner. We thought we were really doing something back then.
Oh
We
yeah.
thought we were the stuff,
Oh yeah.
look at this. And then on top of it, it aired on Channel 3, which was Salmon's Communications
Oh yeah.
at the time,
Yeah.
and so people in the community could turn on Channel 3 and see
Uh-huh.
Colonial Corner, and there I was, doing my thing. It's funny because Tyrone Thomas was also did the TV station with me, and coincidentally, I spoke to him last night, and we were kind of reminiscing. But yeah, that was the TV aspect of it, and I also did worked with the radio station
Okay.
some, and I think it was HSV,
J
was it
J
JSV,
JSV, yeah.
JSV. Um, and and while I was there, I got my own air radio license, which, as I understand it, is not even something that's required these days. But back then, you had to have a
Yeah.
radio license in order to, even be a disc jockey on the radio, and certainly to be one there at WJSV. So I did get my radio license. It has since expired, but I was just trying to gear up and sort of do whatever I could do to prepare myself for,
Mm-hmm.
this eventual career, and had
Sure.
lots of fun doing it. And the director of the club for both radio and TV, Wallerstein, Mr.
Mm-hmm.
Wallerstein, he emailed me some years later and was like, "Oh man, I remember when you were on the TV club and you were on the radio station, and now look at you." We kind
I
of
was gonna say.
reminisced via email, and then it was really good to hear from him.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So thinking about that, and then we'll talk about college in a moment, but talking about the late '80s, or as we progressed into graduating, who in the media, in TV media or radio media, who did you have some sort of role model that you kind of looked up to, or kind of wanted to kind of mold yourself after?
Well, I because we grew up in North Jersey,
Mm-hmm.
you watched New York news. That was our quote unquote local news.
Yeah.
And sidebar, once again, I didn't have until I went to college, I didn't have a really good understanding of what local news was, because we don't really have local news,
No.
and not local TV news, at
Yeah.
least not at that time. We didn't really have local
Mm-hmm.
TV news. We got all of our news from New York, and the only time they came to town, if they came to town ever, it would have to be so big that would bring them to Morristown. And now at least there's News 12 New Jersey. I
Mm-hmm.
think back then there was New Jersey Network News, but we didn't see them in town very often
Yeah.
either.
Yeah.
So I had a pretty skewed vision of what local news was. But growing up we would watch New York news, specifically Channel 7, every night at dinner time. We'd have, dinner on the table, and my parents would turn on Channel 7 Eyewitness News. And so back then it was Bill Butel and Roger Grimsby,
Yeah.
and Roz Abrams,
Sure.
and
Ernie Anastas.
Ernie Anastas,
Mm-hmm.
and John Johnson.
Yep. John Johnson.
And
Yep.
and as far
Yeah.
as and where John Johnson was concerned, he was the first black man that I saw on the anchor desk, that I saw with
Okay.
regularity, because we watched Channel 7 every night.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, I looked at him and thought, wow, so he did this. I wonder if that's something I could do. And this is
Yeah.
going back, John Johnson. You'd have to be at least our age to probably remember him.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
To remember him.
Yeah.
But so I would say looking at him was definitely a thought of, that whole idea of mirroring and saying, hey, well, he did it, maybe I could
Yeah.
do it too, type
Yeah.
thing. But all of them, the whole cast over at Channel 7, we were a 7 household. And so I would say a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of those guys on there is who I looked at, and who I would practice in front of the mirror and say, yeah, I could say that. I could
Yeah.
be like that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and just had a good time. And I think had good examples right before me, because we were fortunate enough to grow up in an area where we were watching the number one market in the country.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
And also, and I think now it's changed, but I still get the same sense. There's always been, when you grew up in that area and you saw the news, like you mentioned, ABC News, there was a polish to those broadcasts that when you went to other parts of the country and you watched the news, you're like, is this a
Right.
parody? Because it
Right.
was so different. And then I had a chance. I work in technology, and I remember doing a project for CBS, and I was in the CBS building in New York City, waiting in the lobby for our the person I was meeting with to come down and get me from security. And in walked Scott Pelley.
Mhm.
And to see that type of personality. I mean, I never got a chance to meet like a Mike Wallace. I'd love to meet Joshua Johnson. He
Right.
was when he had the 1A program on NPR. I mean,
Right.
his voice was
Mhm.
just sucks you in. There's a certain awe, even if you're not in the industry like you are, and a lot of it was cultivated because of the good fortune of where we grew up. To be outside of that area is just amazing, even to this day.
Right.
When you look at other broadcasts, so.
Well, I mean, that's exactly true. You go to other areas and it's like, they don't do it the way that they do it in New York. And at the time, look, as a kid, you don't know the difference. All you
Sure.
know is that's your news. But as you get older, you recognize that, well, there's a reason why they don't do it the way that they do it in New York, you know?
Yeah.
And so you're right. I think I was very, very fortunate to have that as my first example. As opposed to being someplace else where it might have been a smaller market, because the aspirations maybe wouldn't have been as great. I wouldn't have had a picture before me of what, I don't want to make it over dramatic, but for lack of a better word, I wouldn't have had a picture in front of me of what excellence looked like,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And if I did, the bar may have been a bit lower. When we were in high school, we also, in one of our classes, I don't remember which one, we traveled to, we did have WWOR in Secaucus,
Yeah.
Channel 9. And at the time, it was Brenda Blackman was the main anchor there, along with, what's his name? They used to do the Today Show with Katie Couric. He had a pretty unfortunate exit from the Today Show, but
He was on WOR. He was on there. Matt Lowry.
Matt Lowry, yes,
He was on
yes,
WOR. Was he really?
yes. He was the co-anchor on WWOR with Brenda Blackman back when we went to sit in on in the studio
Yeah.
for one of the shows, and the two of them talked to us. And yeah, so Matt was there back then, and so to watch his ascension onto the Today Show and everything else he did for years and years after that, it was like, man, I saw them, I got to talk to them, I knew them. I thought that was a big deal, and for somebody like me, it was a big deal.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. So then after graduating from Morristown, you went to Hampton University. Is that right?
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
So how was that for you? Well, first, why Hampton? Is it because of their media program? Was it something that drew you into there?
So, a couple things. As I explained, I grew up in Morristown, and my whole life, K through 12, same house, same street. I wanted to get out of town.
Sure.
I was ready to leave Morristown, and I was ready to leave New Jersey. I wanted to see, I thought there's a great big world out there, and I have majored in this small part of it for a long time. I was ready to go somewhere and do something else and see something else. So part of my college experience was I wanted to go somewhere else and be in a different place. In addition to that, I also had a real inclination to want to attend an HBCU, a historically black college or university. Okay. And so I applied to, I think, 6 colleges, and probably 3 or 4 of the 6 were HBCUs. And then, unlike some of our classmates who did college tours and visits, and families would take these trips and go visit all these slew of colleges, and you got to see all these different campuses and programs and this and that. And next thing, my father said, "We're going to go visit one college. Pick one." And it's like, but I haven't been on any college campus. I don't even know how to go about choosing which one, I want to see. And he was like, "Not my problem. Figure that out." So, some folks who I went to church with had gone to Hampton, and I was like, well, what about if we go down to Hampton? So he agreed, and we went down to Hampton and really just fell in love with the campus.
Okay.
And the atmosphere there. The program, they had a decent communications program at the time. But on our way back home, we were passing through Richmond, and I had applied to VCU back then, Virginia Commonwealth University. And I said to Dad, I was like, hey, see the sign for VCU right here off the highway. Hey, can we stop here and take a look? He's like, nope. and kept right on going. So, I visited. Wow. I visited a grand total of one college during my high school years, and so I guess in that sense the choice was pretty easy. But I actually did get a full scholarship offer to a different school that had another HBCU that had a pretty good communications program. But my parents weren't the keenest on me going there. It meant going even farther from home than I would have been going to Virginia. So we stuck with Hampton.
Yeah. So being from Morristown and going away to Hampton, what was the transition like for you? Were you prepared?
I think so. I was prepared first and foremost, I think mentally. It gave me a good opportunity to see what it would be like to, like most college kids, to really be on your own.
Yeah.
We knew a few people in the area, but it's not like I saw them all that often. And it gave me that first taste of, like, I loved college. I look back on the college years with such fondness because, you get all the benefits of being an adult without all the responsibilities of being an adult. College is great.
Yeah.
And so, was I ready? Was I prepared? I did feel ready. I did feel prepared, and I thoroughly enjoyed my college years. I do think I made the right choice in going to Hampton for both my major and for, the social gains of it as well. It's continued singing in choir as I had since elementary and junior high, which is something else that I did the whole time growing up, continued that in college. And so, it was a great experience for me. If I don't know, I used to say if there was one area of life I would repeat, it would be going to college. If I could go back and repeat anything. But then you live a little bit longer and you experience other things. You know what? It's like, oh, I would repeat this if I ever had to repeat. And so, but I guess all I can say is I enjoyed those 4 years thoroughly.
Excellent. So then you graduate college. So just real quickly, can you talk about what was the process like from you graduating to getting a job in broadcasting? Was it easy? Did the university help you? Or was it like every man for themselves, good luck?
It was a little of help from the university and more of you better get out there and get it yourself. And back then, TV news, not that it's not competitive now, but when you think about the landscape of just industries in general, employees are needed. Employees are desired and they're needed in every career field. So TV news is no exception rather. We need good and quality folks, and they're hard to come by. There's a lot of competition out there for good workers. And so, but I say that to say that back then, the paradigm was a little different. People were beating down the door to get into TV jobs. The TV stations across the nation had the pick of the litter. They could replace you in a heartbeat and not think twice about it because there were so many people who were waiting to get your job. So considering that competitive landscape, I knew I had to do something to make myself as marketable as possible. And so graduating from my senior year, I was also involved in the TV station in college. And so I had gotten together a resume tape that could be sent out. And I got a couple of interviews, and I was hoping to land my first job before I even graduated from college because, quite frankly, I did not want to go to grad school. I had no inclination whatsoever to go to grad school. I was sick of school at the moment. I was ready to go into my career, make some money, and just move on. And so I got my resume tape together and I sent it out to a couple of stations, and I got a couple of interviews, one of which was at WVIR in Charlottesville, Virginia. And then one of them was at WBOC in Salisbury, Maryland. I went to the interview in Charlottesville, and I thought it went pretty well. They did give me a written test that was almost like a history test and some other things. That part I didn't do so well on. And surprisingly, I didn't hear from the news director again. I went on the interview in Salisbury, Maryland, while I was still in college. This is my senior year, and it sounded very promising. It sounded like, wow, this is going to work out. But on the day of the interview, my car broke down. I had an aging car, and it broke down before I could get out of town. So I had to call the news director and say, I got to get my car fixed, but I'm still coming. And she's like, yes, still come. I said, okay. And then I got my car fixed, and then I get on the road, and I'm already late. I'm somewhat flustered. I'm wondering what kind of perception they're going to have of me after showing up late for this interview. And so I drive up Route 13 through the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel. And one of the things you have to do when you go through that very long bridge tunnel is turn on your headlights. And so I had my headlights turned on the whole time. And then when I came out of the bridge tunnel, I forgot to turn them off. And because it was daylight, I didn't realize I had them on. So I got to the TV station finally, and I go running into the building, and my headlights were still on. This is a 1977 Electra 225. It did not beep to let you know your headlights were still on. And so I get inside and I do the interview, and I think it goes halfway well. I'm able to alibi the fact that I'm so late, and she seemed to be so, understanding and whatnot. I took a written test that seemed to go well. And then at the end of the interview, she told me she didn't have anything available. And I'm like, it's because I'm late, isn't it? It's because I didn't get here. And, I'm asking myself all these questions, feeling not too good about it. And then I go and get in the car, and the car is dead. Batteries died because I left my headlights on the whole time I was in the interview. Had to go back inside and ask the very same person who just told me they weren't going to give me a job to give me a jump, which they did. And I was able to drive back. But I graduated and was able to secure an internship, a 6-month paid internship, which was a big deal at the time because most internships in TV were not paid.
Yeah.
But I had scored a 6-month paid internship in DC, in the Washington, DC market at WJLA TV. It's the ABC affiliate in DC.
Okay.
And it was a management trainee program for newsrooms.
Okay.
And so I went there, and I worked there for about 4 months and was doing well and was getting paid and was enjoying myself, and was also continuing to go out with crews to get more information and more substance for my resume tape to continue building it, because I knew I still wanted to be a reporter. And about 4 months in, the news director from WBOC, whose interview I arrived too late and had my battery die and had to give me a jump, hunts me down and finds out that I'm at WJLA in DC, calls the news director there who she knows and asks him about me. He gives me a glowing review, and long story long, she hires me. So that belated trip to Salisbury worked out after all. I thought it wouldn't, but that was my first on-air job, which I started the October after graduating the preceding May. So from May to September, I was in Washington, D.C. on that internship and started a full-time job, my first on-air full-time job as a reporter that October in Salisbury, Maryland.
So let me ask you this. Your first day on the air, how was your belly feeling that day?
Man, I just wanted to do well, and to your point, when I looked on TV and saw, I'm just going to be honest. When I looked on TV and saw what the other people in that market were doing, I thought to myself, I can at least do as well as they're doing, and so to your point, it's like, maybe if I had been in New York and looking at the competition and sizing them up, it would have been a different story. But I was in Salisbury, Maryland, and I saw what they were doing. I was like, okay, I got at least that much. I can do this. And so, but I just wanted to do well, and I wanted to, I wanted to knock it out of the park. And, my news director, my first news director, was very supportive and encouraging, and it went well. I could not have asked for a better first experience. And then the very first live shot, the very first live report I ever did. Now that's when I think I became even more nervous than the first report itself. There's one thing, it's one thing doing a report that's recorded that you can edit and, you put on air. But it's another thing when you go live for the first time, and it's like, how do you do this? And trying to teach someone how to do live TV, there's only so much you can do to teach that. You have to kind of do it.
Yeah.
And so that was unnerving. I remember I went live from a senior center they were having some type of like fair, like senior fair at the local senior center. And I went live for our noon news. And that was my first big live shot. And looking back on it, I'm sure it was terrible, but I had to get introduced somehow.
Sure.
And that was,
Sure.
that was kind of the beginning of it.
Yeah. But then after that, you went to the Christian News Network?
So there were several steps in between.
Okay.
There were several steps in between. From there, I went to Norfolk, Virginia, where I was there for nearly 4 years. And then from Norfolk, I went to CNN and in Atlanta, and I worked for CNN for 5 years.
Okay.
And then I left CNN and went to the ABC station in Atlanta, WSB-TV, and was there for 8 years. And then went from WSB to Charlotte, North Carolina, to WSOC as weekend anchor there, and was there for a couple of years. And then to Richmond as morning anchor, and then to CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network. So kind of one of the things characteristic of TV news is you do a bit of moving around. Because in order to progress in the field, it usually requires, and I say usually because, there are lots of exceptions, but it usually requires a bit of moving around. And I was no exception there. So,
So when you were there, you were White House correspondent, right? So when you were on the North Lawn there, doing a shot, and you looked around, you saw people from major networks around you. Was that intimidating, or was that the moment where you're like, oh yeah, like this is where I belong?
It was not, to be honest, it was not intimidating, but you got to understand, Pete, by that point, I had been in the business for like 25 years. So what I'm doing, I'm looking around, and really I'm seeing peers and colleagues who I have worked with in the past, or who we've at least had some passing contact with in years past. The business really is not that big. And so you tend to see people over and over again. And so they might be working for a different network than me, but in some ways it was more like it's strange to say, it was more like a reunion of sorts. Like, hey man, I haven't seen you, and what are you doing? Where's what have you been doing? And what's up? And where'd you go before here? And just kind of seeing people that you had, and those who you didn't know. A lot of them hadn't been in the business as long as I had. So it was kind of, it wasn't less intimidating, and more, I did feel honored to be on that beat, because let's face it, you're at the White House.
Exactly.
And for me to get that promotion, I didn't start off as White House correspondent at CBN. I started off as national security correspondent. And then when our White House correspondent left, the network came to me and said, hey, we'd like you to be our next White House correspondent. And for me, that was huge. I didn't really have any idea, certainly not when I took the job, of being White House correspondent. Not even, quite frankly, not even in my career did I have the idea that I would be a White House correspondent. I'd seen them. I saw what they did. I was familiar, but did I think I would get that opportunity? I just didn't think I was on that track. And notably, I wouldn't have been on that track if I hadn't been at the network where I was. If I hadn't been at CBN, it probably would not have happened even then. So I thought it was a great opportunity. I was extremely humbled and privileged to be offered it. And I jumped on it when they gave me the chance, and was at the White House. I had an office at the White House, which it was a cubby. Let's be very clear. This was not a sprawling office. This was a very small office. Like if you had two people in it, you might bump into each other, but but it was mine.
Exactly.
And you're at the White House.
And I'm at the White House, right?
Exactly.
That's right.
And
did you get to go to the correspondence dinner?
I did not, because before the dinner happened, I actually ended up leaving the network to come to my position, which I was
Okay.
looking forward to going to the correspondence dinner.
Yeah.
I really was. But before, and I would have been invited to go, but I left the network and therefore left the White
Okay.
House. But, I did feel though, Peter, and to your point, I did feel a little bit like a fish out of water because it's like, okay, so what are the mores and forays here? What can I mean, I've been reporting for a long time and anchoring for a long time, but still, this is the White House. Like,
Yeah.
what can you do? What can you not do? Am I going to get arrested by the Secret Service if I walk on, this grass? Or, kind of like, what are the ground rules? And
Yeah.
my predecessor tried to prepare me as much as possible by telling me as much as she possibly could. But still, when you're cut loose and you're there by yourself in the moment, you still don't know exactly what you can and can't do. So
Mhm.
I decided to adopt the whole idea of, well, I'll do it until they tell me I can't.
100%.
you know,
Yep.
so
It's
What
easier
what
to ask for forgiveness than for permission.
there you
what
You
what
go.
know.
Eric? What year was that? What was which administration was it when you were there?
Oh, this was the Biden administration. Yeah, so we're
Oh, got it.
talking
Okay, so
about
that was.
Oh, like just a couple of years ago.
2021.
Oh
Okay.
wow.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And so I remember one day they were having in the Rose Garden, they were having an availability with the president, and they make announcements there in the White House. Press, gather at this door. If you're going to attend the briefing, gather at this door at this time. And I was like, so do they mean me, or do they not mean me? Like, what's the and I didn't have anybody there to immediately ask,
Yeah.
so I was like, well, I'm gonna gather at the door,
Yeah.
see what happens. So I
Yeah.
went there and I went out to the door and I was like, and all the press is there and all the big, all the big wigs are there and they're outside the door and I'm among them. And so we're all kind of talking and I'm feeling a little like a fish out of water, but I'm okay with it because, we'll make this happen. So then they open the door. And when they open the door, we all go in. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to naturally bop in right with everybody else. And I get just across the threshold of the door, and this guy stops me and says, "I'm sorry, who are you with?" And I said, "Oh, I'm with CBN, thanks." And I'm bopping on further, and he's like, "You're not included in this." And so, I looked appropriately shocked. What do you mean? I'm not, what do you mean I'm not included? Oh, you have to have this. You have to have this clearance and that clearance in order to get through here, so you're not able to go. And so, I looked convincingly insulted and and left. But I knew from the beginning that I didn't know whether I was supposed to be there or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
again,
You got to try though. That's the whole
That's
thing.
gotta
You
funny.
got to
Yeah.
try.
try.
Look,
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you don't have to answer this question. So is there one correspondent that you know of that on television they seem like so serious, but when the cameras are off, they're the most goofiest person?
you mean as far as at the White House or
Yeah,
just
at the White
period?
House. Yeah, at the White House.
So what I saw at the White House, those guys were. I was probably the goofiest one because they were. I mean, they were cool folks, but from what during the time that I was around them and the briefings, because I was in the briefings every day with Jen Psaki, who was
Sure.
the White House press secretary at the
Sure.
time, and then watching them running it out and doing their jobs. It's a high pressure, low time job.
Mm-hmm.
And by low time, I mean you don't have a long time to put together what you need to put together to do
Sure.
your job.
Sure.
And so I did not see much of their sort of goofing off and, and quite frankly, I didn't work closely enough with them to see it. We're all there together. But once we leave the briefing room, we're all going to our separate offices to do what it is we need to do, and then you'll see each other lined up there on the lawn about to do your live shots, but again you're kind of concentrated on what it is that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't say that I saw a lot of goofy moments with. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure they were there. I just didn't
I understand.
really
I understand.
witness it. They may have seen it. If you asked them that question, they may have said, yeah, there was this guy named Eric Phillips. He was real goofy.
So now you're at WRIC
Right.
ABC 8
Mhm.
in Richmond, right?
Right.
So, and you're the evening anchor?
I am. I'm main
Okay.
evening anchor here, and I've been here since 2021.
Okay.
And it was that was tough for me
In what way?
because at the time, as we just discussed, I was at the White House,
Yeah.
and I had tons of ideas for, stories that I planned to do, and hard hitting sort of investigative pieces that I like. I wanted to
Mhm.
be, I had a seat with our network's name on it in the briefing room, which to the average person, that may not sound like a big deal. But the point
Mhm.
is, there are so many outlets out there that for you to have a seat in the briefing room, that you don't have to wonder if you can get in each day. You have one dedicated to you. It's in the media world, that's a big deal.
Mhm.
So I had that, and I could go to these briefings every day. I had an office, I had a workspace, and I had access to something that most people just don't have in the course of their lifetime.
Yeah.
And so I was really psyched about it, and trying to sort of build relationships with the press secretaries there behind the scenes,
Mhm.
and seeing how much access I could get. I was really stoked about the aspect of getting access and learning what's behind the inner workings and getting behind the veil. And because I worked for what I like to call a niche network, I
Mhm.
wasn't really following the same path as the mainstream networks. I was working for a Christian-based network. So we were always looking for the stories that would appeal to our viewers, which were slightly different than the mainstream stories. We still covered the mainstream stories, don't get me wrong, but it's the angle by which we were covering these stories. And so that's what kind of made us different, and that kind of gave me an edge in terms of trying to get different interviews and such.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of ideas, and I was really enjoying it. And then, but out of nowhere, this job came knocking, and it was an opportunity to be the main anchor here at this ABC station. And
Mhm.
my family was still living here in the Richmond area. I was commuting to DC every day from Richmond, which is
Okay.
roughly a 2-hour commute, depending
Yeah.
upon traffic. And we had not moved up that way because we weren't sure when I first started that job exactly how it was going to go. And we didn't want to just up and move the whole family and blah, 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 blah. So when this came along, it was like, man, this is an opportunity to go back home, and to be, and to be the main anchor,
Yeah.
and to be in a position that I could see myself having for, conceivably a number of years. I thought that it was the timing. I wished sort of that, it had come along maybe even 6, 7, 8 months later, after I had a chance to be, in the White House, be it a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But it came along when it did. And I thought that it was just the right opportunity for me and for my family long term.
Yeah.
So that's how I ended up here. And I'm very happy here. I'm not,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying it was tough because, man, I felt like it was
Mhm.
a great job.
Yeah.
But this job here has also been very, very good to me.
Yeah. That's great. The last question I have on this before we move to the 5 simple questions that we have for you is working for an affiliate for a network. Is it the goal? Is the dream to make it to national?
So it depends on who you ask. For some people, that is the dream. Is that my dream?
Mhm.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Because, Peter, I've had the opportunity to, at this point in my life and in my career,
Mhm.
fortunately, I have done both national and local news. I mentioned I had been at CNN. I was there for 5 years, and I was covering national news the whole time. I was
Okay.
national correspondent
Okay.
there, and traveling extensively doing that. And then again, for CBN, I was
Mhm.
national security correspondent. So I'm
Sure.
covering national news there
Okay.
for a national network. So I have that in my, in my experience bucket. Don't really feel like I've missed out on anything where that's concerned. Like, I
Sure.
know what it's like to do that. I don't have to wonder, hey, what would it be like to be a national correspondent, or, to work on that level, because I've done
Mhm.
it. So now to be working back in the local scene, which I've done that before too, I'm I'm pretty happy with
Great.
it, and I'm more so these days in this market and in this newsroom, more so a mentor to a lot of journalists who are coming up in the next generation,
Mhm.
and sort of helping to lead this newsroom, and give guidance to a lot of those who are beginning their careers. And so that has, a
Uh-huh.
level of intrigue and satisfaction in it all its own. And so, so is my goal to go to the national level? Now, let me be very clear. If NBC Nightly News called me and said, Eric, we want you to come anchor NBC Nightly News, Lester's out, you're in, I'm going to say yes. Let that be known. I'm going to say yes. But short of something like that happening,
Sure.
I'm very comfortable and satisfied with where I am. And that's not to say that I don't have any more moves left in me, that I'm here for the rest of my life. I'm not necessarily saying that, but in terms of having this desire to do national news and be on the network level, it's not necessarily so.
Let me before you start on the 5 questions, let me ask you an even more important question. You're the guy in Richmond, evening news anchor. You roll up to a restaurant on date night. You get a little love, you know what I mean? You walk in. That's what I want. That's what I want to know, because
so Terry, the answer to your question is yes.
We are so coming down to Richmond.
Yeah, we're coming to Richmond.
I mean, people watch our station, and the thing about local news is people feel like, especially when and that's the difference. You've just really outlined the difference between national news and local news. When you're in local news, people feel like they know you, because you're on their TV every night.
Yeah.
At the same time, people don't really, let's be honest. People don't really feel like they know David Muir. They don't really feel like they know Lester Holt, even though they're great at their jobs. Don't get me wrong. This is no disrespect intended to them, but people don't really feel like they know them. They respect them, but they don't feel like they know them. But where their local news anchors and local news reporters are concerned, the viewing audience tends to have a much more personal relationship with them. So when we roll up, my family rolls up at a restaurant or at the store. It's like, hey, it's the news guy. Hey, Eric, how you doing? Hey, man, I was just watching you a minute ago. And folks get all excited. Sometimes they want to take pictures. Sometimes they want, autographs or that type of thing, which I'm like, and it wasn't really, and that's happened throughout my career, but it wasn't really strange until adults started doing it. Like when kids did it, it was one thing. It's like, oh, I'm inspiring. But adults, it's like, what are you going to do with this autograph? Like, what are you exactly? So, but folks do get excited. And at this point, quite frankly, I've gotten to the point where I'm glad they do, because if they didn't get excited, I'd be in trouble. So,
Sure. Well, that's great, man. That's really great. You don't want us coming down, because we will definitely get thrown out of some restaurants.
It would be like you traveling with Secret Service when you were at the White House.
Right.
So let's move on to our 5 simple question segment here. So what would Eric, 2024 Eric, if he had an opportunity to slip 1990 Eric a note the night before graduation, what would you tell him?
I would probably tell 1990 Eric to be a little bit more deliberate about living in the moment, to not be so careful about what he does next and have everything sort of have to make sense and fit into, a logical compartment or box, but to not be afraid to take more measured risks than he actually took in those years going forward, because only by taking those measured risks can you get the measured success that you want to get.
Sure.
So I would probably tell my 1990 self to be confident in my abilities, and be willing to step out on faith even more than I did. I won't say that I didn't do that at all, but even more than I did, and be willing to take risks earlier on. Like I'm more so willing to do that these days, but be more so willing to take risks earlier on, because you never know where those risks might lead.
Sure. Great advice. Really is.
Awesome.
So looking back at your 4 years at Morristown, we talked about the different teachers, at the radio station, all that. But when you look at the 4 years, who most influenced you or inspired you teacher-wise in high school?
Let's see. Teacher-wise. Well, so can I name two?
Yeah, you can name as many as you
Okay.
want.
Yeah, I think that one was Mr. Walters, Wayne
Mm-hmm.
Walters. He was the chorus director.
Yeah.
And like I said, I was in chorus all 4 years. And so we worked together pretty closely.
Mm-hmm.
Coincidentally, I had been in his wife's class, who also taught in the Morris School District. Mrs. Walters was my sixth
Sure.
grade teacher at Sussex Avenue.
Sure.
And so there was kind of a familiarity with him and with the family in general. But the professionalism by which he approached choral music and
Mm-hmm.
his craft was there, even with a bunch of students. It's not like he treated it like we were students who didn't know choral music. He treated it like a professional group, and he expected that to be to be the resolute action. So
Sure.
I would say he was definitely one. I would also say I see her face, man, and I was about to say her name, Miss Murphy, Linda
Oh,
Murphy.
Linda Murphy, great
Yes,
teacher.
um,
Great teacher.
she was my I think trig teacher
Mm-hmm.
and in high school, and I would say where she's concerned, it's not that Miss Murphy. She just stayed on me. Like, she did not let up at all. She
Mm-hmm.
expected and pushed for excellence. And
100%.
I remember one day I got frustrated, and I was like, Miss Murphy, this class, when am I ever in life going to use this? I was like,
Mm-hmm.
let's just be honest. I thought I was
Mm-hmm.
breaking it down for her. I was like, let's just be honest. When am I ever going to use this? Like, this
Mm-hmm.
has no real purpose in my life outside of
Mm-hmm.
this class. And so, do I really care about it? Marginally. And she was like, well, that's one way to look at it. And she said, but, and she said, but, the thing about it, Eric, is when it comes to going to college and having college prep courses, this is in the lineup.
Yeah.
So if you don't pass this class, you don't really have the college preparatory credits that you need to have. And it's going to make it more difficult for you to get into college.
Yeah.
So think about that. I was like,
Yeah.
well, when
Yeah.
you put it that way, maybe I will give it a little bit more attention. So
Yeah.
she kept me, she helped keep me in line,
Yeah.
and I appreciated that.
Yeah. She was one of those. She was tough, but she
Hmm.
cared, and she
Yes.
wanted everybody to do well. Probably one of the toughest, best teachers I ever had
Yeah.
while our time there. Um. Okay. So let's say your executive producer says to you, "Hey, Eric, listen. We're going to do a segment with all of our anchors. We want you to go back to your hometown and do a 30-minute segment. So you're going to go back to Morristown. What would your segment be about?"
Hmm. Man, okay, so the first two things that so first of all, I'll say, I don't know. But, but, but the first two things that came to mind
Yeah.
were, um, we're doing a segment on Morristown High School and what's going on around there these days compared to
Okay.
when I was there. But quickly what came to mind was the evolution of the green in Morristown and the area
Excellent.
around the green,
Sure.
because it has changed so much from when we were growing up,
Mm-hmm.
how it looks. People come to Morristown these days for nightlife. Like,
Yeah.
that's a thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
that was not a thing when we were
Yeah.
growing up. And
Absolutely.
so, there was, the green was anchored by department stores, Macy's and Epstein's,
Sure.
which
Mhm.
neither one of them exists now. So I would probably be wanting to take a look at the evolution of the
Okay.
green and then that area around there.
Okay. So we didn't really talk about music and your love for music, but if I were to jump in your car right now, turn on the radio, what's coming on?
First thing you're probably going to hear is gospel.
Okay.
Uh, and then after that, you're probably going to hear R&B.
Okay.
Um, and but I do, quite honestly, I have a love for a lot of different types of music. And
Yeah.
like I said, I was in choir or chorus all throughout, through
Uh-huh.
college, and even joined a music fraternity as well. So
Mm-hmm.
called the Brothers of 151 Incorporated. So
Okay.
it's been a big part of my life and continues to be. But yeah, if you were to jump in my car, you'd probably hear some gospel followed by some R&B, maybe 50-50 of both.
Awesome. Awesome. And our final question, which is always food related. What restaurant or food do you miss from New Jersey or in Morristown area?
Hmm. So, the Morristown, the restaurants that come to mind, I don't even think they're there anymore.
Food them out. Let's
So,
see.
but, um, so there used to be a restaurant on South Street, I think, heading towards Madison and beyond, called Bonanza. It was a buffet, and we
Uh-huh.
used to go there. It was really good.
Uh-huh.
Enjoyed that growing up.
Much
Uh,
respect for that place.
you remember Bonanza?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then there was, at the Morris County Mall, which I know this place is not there anymore,
What's
but
that?
there was the Ground Round.
Sure.
Uh, and this place might still be there. I don't know. What was the name of the pizza shop right around the corner from the high
Suvio's?
school?
Suvio?
Suvio's, yes.
It's still
Uh,
there. We were just there.
oh,
Yeah.
really?
Oh, yeah.
You
So
go back and
Suvio,
it's like, boy, this place was much smaller than I remember it.
Yeah.
yeah. Man, I remember walking from the high school during lunch, especially when you had senior privileges, going over
Oh,
there,
yeah.
going over to Suvio's, and also the one right there on Speedwell
Quarter-
Avenue.
Which one?
Uh, it was, and again, it may not still be there, but it was on Speed Road, right across from Headquarters Plaza. It was and near Brooms, which I don't think Brooms is there anymore, but it was right in that area. Pizza shop, real popular back in the day. They had great pizza,
Oh, I know.
but
I gotta think of the name. When was the
yeah.
last time you were in town?
So I was there. Actually, I was there in February.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I was there last month, just the weekend after Valentine's Day.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
that's
because
good.
like I said,
That's
my
good.
mom is still there, so we try to get back and check on her, and
That's great.
check on the house and see what's going on.
That's awesome. Well, listen, Eric, we really appreciate you taking the time sitting with us today. We know
Yeah,
you have a busy schedule. It was great seeing you, man. And, um, hopefully next year for our 35th reunion, man, hopefully you can
yeah,
come up for it, man. 35 years. Oh, my God.
I know.
But again, on behalf of my brother and I, we want to thank you. You've been a wonderful guest. And for Beyond the Green, I am Peter. This is Eric. And this is my brother Terry, all Morristown High School alumnus. Have a wonderful evening. Take care and be good to each other.